So what do we got going on today? Other guys. Pull my shirt up. It's that kind of night. We're live. Probably everybody's done watching the various football games, if you guys even do that. But tonight we are going to talk about fuel, and more specifically 1,000cc injectors. I know that we've gone into great detail before on the 80cc's, like the DECA stuff, and we obviously offer those as well. And I've used those many, many times. The problem with a lot of these injectors, including the 80s and the 1000s as well, is that you have the first thing I want to talk about tonight is you get a big range of quality of these injectors. So obviously there's lots of stuff that comes from offshore, and I'm not one to put that down. I'm one to test that stuff and then try it and see if it works. And then if it doesn't, it's not going to be that great. And that's one area where I don't think that the quality, maybe the ability to machine and manufacture the things that they have to in injectors, I don't think that that's there yet. So that's one area where I would be leery. I mean, there are a lot of good things that come from overseas, like some intake manifolds and stuff I've used a lot. There's lots of things that I've used that work just fine. Injectors is not one of those things, and probably lifters as well. I don't think that I would do lifters either. That's just, I don't know if the precision's not there or whatever the deal is. But we've had some issues with things like that, and after I do that, I just get you just get a bad taste in your mouth. And maybe it's what I got. Maybe it's something that's been overcome. I don't know that. But right now, I just know that that's not what I would do. So injectors is one area where I would get good stuff. So we want to talk a little bit about the math tonight on injectors, particularly the 1000cc's. We have those at richardholdenerperformance.com. There are other places to buy them as well. Just make sure that you get, like, ours are genuine Bosch injectors. They were originally Bosch injectors. Now we are decapping these because that's what every 1000cc injector out there is. If in case you didn't know that's what they are. And then, as I've said many, many times, long before we were selling injectors, and in fact, this goes back to, we use decap injectors on my Civic, on this thing right here. So most of the guys are here. I've seen this car plenty of times. Land speed record deal, 226 miles an hour. But we use way back from Steve at Powertrain Dynamics. A shout out to Steve, and his wife. They're just nothing but awesome people, and I could say nothing but good things about them, and help me do a bunch of dyno testing on that car and get all the stuff that we were going on the Del Sol, and just everything that when I was down there working, when I had Rammer Technology, even when I was just down there doing stuff, just hanging out at the show shop, hanging out at Powertrain Dynamics and stuff, just awesome stuff. So nothing but good things. But they took a set of, I think back then they were like 36-pound Bosch, like Ford injectors for one of the Ford applications, probably a turbo coupe or something like that. Maybe it wasn't the 150s yet that we later on tried that were the flex fuel injectors. But they were one of the Ford injectors. And so he decapped those, and they ended up flowing 75 or 80 pounds. And we used those in the Turbo Civic. I think that there definitely was some variances, but I think that if I remember right, we did 8 of them. And I think that we got 4 that were pretty close. And that's one of the things that when you do this, they're not all going to come out the same. We know now, because Jimmy has done a bunch of them, and we bought an injector flow machine. We did get that from China because all we're looking to do on that really is make sure that we can, and we're probably going to upgrade this machine. I think we're going to put a bigger pump in it and stuff, just so that it'll support things that we're trying to support. Because, and this is has been my complaints, even with the ASNU machine, which is a really, really nice piece, like the one that the guys at WestTech have. But if you try to test, big injectors, because let's face it, if we're putting big injectors in something, we're usually doing that for something that's going to make a lot of power. And so you need big injectors. And so, if you're going to flow that, and you're going to try to flow 8 of them, and so that you can see that they're all balanced and all that stuff, if you have all 8 of them come on at one time on any of these machines, there's not enough pump to support that. Like if you set the static fuel pressure with nothing flowing through the injectors, if you set the static pressure on these machines, let's say you set it at 58 psi because it's an LS. I mean, a lot of times you could test at a lower pressure than that. If you're just testing whether they're all the same, they're balanced, you don't have to pick 58 psi. You pick 43, but whatever you pick, if you have hit all of them for a static flow test, there's no fuel pressure from that pump because it cannot support the flow rate of all those injectors. So we're thinking about, doing a boosted pump kind of thing, or putting a 255 or a 340 or, whatever, a 450 or one of our Hellcat Plus, like our 535 pumps or something in there, so that we have more system pressure. The other thing with those injector machines, and this is true, I think, of all of the ones that I've seen anyway, is that the graduated cylinders that they have to measure the fuel flow, they're never big enough. I mean, you can't flow like a 1,000 cc injector or a 1,500 or a 2,000 cc injector. There just isn't enough room, so you have to flow it for like a few seconds. And the problem with that is that you then multiply that out, like, oh, I flowed it for 5 seconds. I got to multiply that by 12, and then the problem with that is an error that you see does it get multiplied by 12? Like if I see a 2 cc variance when I floated for 5 seconds, if I multiply that by 12, that's a big variance in fuel flow. It might not be from a percentage standpoint, but it's a lot. It's more than I would want. And also, does it exactly do that is always my question. When we do that test, well, does that scale out? Like we had a big enough graduated cylinder and we were able to flow the thing for 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever, so that we could get a real sample rate. Does it continue at the same scale? Does it continue the same percentage? Does it increase? I just don't know that. And if we were trying to do that, like I said, we need more fuel pump in those test systems. But for our thing, with the key to that is just flowing them one at a time. So you flow one injector and then flow the other one and then flow the other one and flow the other one. And a lot of times you got to dump the test fluid back in because the reservoir in these test machines might not be enough to fill all that up. So, there's a procedure for all this. But the upshot of all this is that when you do a bunch of injectors, which we had to buy lots of injectors, a bunch of them. And so we have to do the machining on each one and then flow test them all to get matched groups of injectors. And that's very, very important. So if you're doing that, or if you are buying them from somebody, make sure that they're doing that. They're not just going, hey, I'm taking this Joe Schmo's injectors in, whatever, we're redoing it, I'm sending it back to you. I don't know that that's going to work. But and also make sure that they're not injectors from somewhere that's not going to be like a non-Bosch injector. That's going to be a good injector to begin with, and then when they're done, that they're really going to be 1,000 cc injectors, and they're all going to flow the same, because you want all of that to happen. We have those, and they're a really good price. I think that ours is probably in fact, we've had people contact us and tell us you need to raise your price on your stuff. So that's when you're having an effect on the market. But so the price is really good on them. I think that they're $6.99 for a set, which is a good deal for these injectors if you know anything about them. And then what I want to talk about tonight is like, how much power will they support? Because we get that question all the time. Well, how much power can I make? Well, it's pretty simple math because we've gone through this before. If you're just looking to buy 1,000 cc injectors and you want to know how much power they'll make on a naturally aspirated motor, which nobody would do. I mean, maybe a big block guy might do that or something, but even then, you're not going to have 1,500 horsepower NA like big blocks. I mean, not that a guy can't do that. You can do that. I guess Pro Stock's probably up there. Maybe a 900-inch mountain motor. Those kinds of things make more power than that. But, a guy's usually going to do staged injectors and anything like that anyways. But if you take the flow rate of the injector, which let's say that's 95 pounds an hour, and you multiply that by 16, on a V8, that's how you calculate how much power that injector will support. Now, that's at a 0.5 brake specific. On an LS motor, it's going to be better than that. And that's at 100% duty cycle. So it's going to be better than that. Most guys don't want to run at 100%. But you didn't ask what it is at 80%. You could take that number and multiply it by 80 if you want to do that. If you think, oh, it can't go over 80. No, it can. And I have many, many times gone way over 80%. I've gone to 100% on injectors, and it still works. It's not recommended, and it's better if you don't do that. But you still can get there. And if the question is how much will they support, if we take 95 and multiply it by 16, you get over 1,500 horsepower. But again, nobody's going to do that. They're all going to want to know how much it will support on a boosted application. Because if you're going to put 1,000cc injectors in it, particularly an LS or whatever, small block Chevy, small block Ford, Dodge, whatever you're going to do on your turbo kind of thing, then it's going to be boosted. And so because you run your boosted combination at a richer mixture, at a different air fuel ratio, you're supplying more fuel for the given power output. It takes more fuel. So those injectors will support less power when the thing is richer. That stands to reason. So what you do is you take that number that we use when we take the 95, multiply it by 16, we get like 1,500 horsepower. Well, now you take that number, and I like to multiply it by 0.85 because that puts us down in the 11-to-1 range, because you're starting out at, like, let's say 13-to-1, and then it's in the 11s is somewhere near 0.85 of 13.0, let's say. We're getting rough measurements here. All of this simple math, this super Richie simple math, is rough estimates on these things. You can't go like, well, Richard said I could make 1,520 horsepower. Don't do that. If you're at 1,480, you need bigger injectors. You shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be trying to get the last little bit out of it. But you can support under boost. You could probably support 1,200 plus horsepower under boost on gas. And that's an important thing, because when we get into how much power can we support on E85, that number drops down even further. So we went from our NA thing down to our now we're running richer under boost thing. So let's say 1,200 and change. There's room, there's some wiggle room there up above 1,200. But now we have to multiply it by, you guys can use their multiplier any way that they want. You can multiply that times 0.5 or 0.2 or 0.75 because it's 25% more fuel, or 0.7 because it's 30% more fuel. But when you start doing this math, 1,000cc injectors puts you 900 on E85, puts you somewhere in the 900 to 1,000. I think you might be able to squeak by if you had to, and I don't recommend this, but you could get 1,000 horsepower maybe because of the brake specific on these motors. You're not running them at, not running them at a 0.5 brake specific. It's going to be more than that under boost, but 900 certainly possible, and probably more than that on E85, because you're still running it rich and you're having to use a lot more fuel, because the lambda number on E85, you have to use a lot more fuel to generate the same 11-to-1, let's say, or 11.5-to-1, wherever you want to run it. You have to use more fuel to achieve that on a gas scale. So it takes 25 or 30% more fuel to have it be the same air fuel ratio as we were talking about with the gasoline. So now the injectors have to flow a lot more fuel to make an even lower amount of power, basically. So those 1,000 cc's, figure 900, 950 in that range at the most. I've seen guys do more than that, but everything has to be right. And again, all of this assumes that you have to have enough fuel pump to support this. Because here's what happens is, Jimmy and I were talking about this on his S2000 with his regulator, the way that he has it. He's got 2,200 cc injectors in there. First of all, it's a 4-cylinder, so they got to be big. Like if you're trying to make 1,000 horsepower with a 4-cylinder, you got to have twice as much fuel as you're trying to do with an 8-cylinder, because you only have 4 injectors, so they got to flow a lot. But with regard to the fuel pump, if you have a fuel pressure regulator and you have a reference line going from the intake manifold over to the fuel pressure regulator, meaning that when the thing is, driving under part throttle under vacuum, let's say, you're taking fuel pressure away. So that's good, because if you have really big injectors and you take fuel pressure away, it makes it a little bit easier to idle like that. But the other thing that it does, conversely, is that under boost, the fuel pressure goes up at a 1-to-1 rate with boost. So when you're trying to inject fuel, if you have 20 pounds of boost, that's 20 pounds of boost resisting whatever fuel pressure you have. So if you had, like I said, let's say we had 60 pounds of fuel pressure, but we have 20 pounds of boost, net of that is only that we have the equivalent of 40 psi of fuel flow. So it's not, so you've reduced the amount of fuel flow that you have. So you only do that by raising the fuel pressure or changing the duty cycle. So if you have a really injector, you can get away with that and just ramp up the duty cycle to offset that loss that you would get of having boost pressure working against the fuel flow from the working against the fuel pressure from the injector. The other way, as I said, if we put a boost reference to the regulator, then when we ran 20 pounds, the fuel pressure went up 20 pounds. So now we have 80 pounds of fuel pressure, and working against 20 pounds of boost, we have a net of 60 PSI of fuel pressure. So it's still working the way that it was designed to do. The problem, there's always a problem. The problem with that is the fuel pump's going, hey, why am I trying to flow this amount of fuel now at 80 PSI? Because the fuel pump flows less at 80 PSI than it does at 60, than it does at 40, than it does at 20. It likes lower pressures. So you've made things good and work properly for the injector, but you've made life harder for the pump. And the way that Jimmy cured that, and the way that we're doing that, is doing a dual pump setup in his S2000. So you got to have a dual pump, big lines, more than enough to feed it. And the second pump switch, comes on a Hobbs switch, so that it comes on only when we need the extra fuel. Because the problem is, if you have both of those fuel pumps, like let's say we have in that S2000, let's say we have 1,200 horsepower worth of fuel flow. Well, since they're on all the time, if they were on all the time, you have to have 1,200 horsepower worth of fuel being used by the motor at idle, which it's not going to do, then or being bypassed by the fuel pressure regulator. So your fuel pressure regulator has to be big enough to bypass 1,200 horsepower worth of fuel, and it's not going to be able to do that. So you get an artificial high fuel pressure reading and all sorts of problems. So you don't want to do that. So you only have one pump going on. So now the thing only has to have, half of that. Basically, it has to be able to return half of that. And that's the other reason why guys want to do these pulse width modulated pumps and stuff, so that you don't have all of that pressure feeding that rail or feeding the regulator while you're just driving around. Because we have, essentially in the pumps, we have 1,000 or 2,000 horsepower with the pumps, but you don't want to be using that all the time and having the thing have to feed that back. Because then the return system from the regulator would just have to be gigantic, and that's not something you want. So the upshot of all this, go get 1,000cc injectors, make sure that you have enough pump to feed those, boost reference the regulator or not, depending on how your system is, and get enough fuel to your turbo motor. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Okay, let's see. Okay, would you boost reference your regulator when adding the RHP 1000cc injectors to your turbo? So if you're going to put big injectors in there, would you boost reference the regulator? Because the other option for doing that, and Jimmy and I talked about this, is that if you have gigantic injectors, you don't need to boost reference your regulator, because you have enough. You're only running, even under wide open throttle, at let's say 50% duty cycle or something, because you got gigantic injectors even under boost. So you could just add duty cycle when you're ramping, when you're turning the boost up, and you still have enough injector flow. Makes life easier on the pump, or just put enough fuel pump in it and kind of be done with it. Sir Cool, what's going on, Lunar? Danny's in the house. Richard, hope you're doing well. I am. Just remember, at FIC is clinic, not connection. It's not the same. You want clinic. Oh, for the injectors, you mean? What size injector should I run in a Dart LS427 NA 110 octane 750 horsepower? You should run our 1000cc injectors. It's more than enough for that. What size injector should I run? Yeah, we did that. I don't think you need to ask 3 times, though. That's not good. What, if any, ARP hardware would you use for an engine rebuild? Don't want to rip the engine out a second time and then going for 700 to 800 horsepower with a turbo. The only things that we do, and I love the guys from ARP and miss Chris greatly. The only ARP stuff I put on LS motors, if that's what it is head studs, head bolts, or head studs. That's it. I don't put mains or rod bolts or any of that in there, because it's not necessary. If you've got a stock bottom end that you've added ring gap to, you're going to break a rod before you break a rod bolt. So that's not necessary. You're also not going to hurt the bottom end stuff. You're not going to hurt the mains. And if you did that, if you did put ARP rod bolts in, or ARP main studs or bolts in, you got to rehone it. You got to resize it because that's going to distort it. So you have to redo that, and I just would never do that. It's not like I said, it's not necessary. We've done lots of the big bang motors, and when you break something, it's not a rod bolt. Every time that we've broken one of these motors, the big end of the rod is still clearly secured onto the crank and spins around. It's just that the other part of the rod is broke. So the rod will break before that, so you don't have to worry about that. Are these matching flow injectors? Yes, ours are. What size injector should I run? Dude, you need to stop doing that, because otherwise you're going to get the boot. You can only test 4 at a time. Yeah, we can only test sometimes 1 at a time. Good to see you guys. Richard, excited to run your Truck Plus cam on E85 in my Trans Am. Also running a 1050 turbo. Nice. Do you have any videos testing your 1050? Jimmy has that on the, we have some video runs of him running that G35 on the S2000, but not, I don't think he's run that on the Tahoe yet. But it would be comparable to the 3584 in terms of response rate. It just has more total flow potential. I used to have a problem with minimum on time for anything over 850 cc's. Many years since I've shopped for a set. What's it like these days? We don't have a problem with that. People tell me what I need to raise the rates for fixing people's cars. Are you doing that already? That's up to you, man. What is your time worth? So the question I have, an LQ4, 65-pound injectors. What boost should I run? I've run 10 pounds and went 1060 so far in 93. Should I up the octane or go to 12 pounds? Just asking the pro. I don't like running elevated boost levels on pump because I think that you run into problems doing that. But if you reduce the timing enough so that it does not detonate, you can get away with more boost. Adding boost is probably easier than, I don't know how much injector you have left. Let's see. 65 times 16 times 0.85. So okay, so on pump you could do let's say 850 horsepower, and these are flywheel numbers, not wheel horsepower numbers. Excuse me. So let's say 850-ish. I don't know where you are right now. I don't know what 10 pounds on a, I don't know what the rest of the LQ4 is. Is it a cam? Does it at least have a cam and stuff in it? If it does, 4, 6, yeah, you're not there yet. So you could probably run another couple pounds on it. You just need a boost reference fuel pressure regulator to bring the duty ratio back to something more normal. I'm learning as I go. I don't have a tuner. I'm running 2000 cc injectors from Injector Dynamics for 8 years on E85. They're great. Yeah, those are good. And particularly for E85. I wanted to buy a Ron Cam shirt. You're going to have them back in stock? I don't think we are, but I can tell you this, that the shirt that we have coming out, you're going to want that. Picked up some 1700 cc injectors for a crazy price. That's good. You could always add another injector or 2 per cylinder. Yeah, the problem with doing stage injection, though, becomes problematic for a lot of ECUs. Certainly, you're not going to do that with a factory ECU. We have seen ECUs that will do that. And if I was doing it, I'd put it in the top of the wherever the intake port is. We definitely would add power if we did that. Higher volume flow means less PSI, which means our injectors are less than at wide open throttle. Not sure. Not understanding what that is in reference to. A very nice boost reference regulator. My wife put it up, and me and her have. Yeah. Oh, you haven't found it? So you guys stored it somewhere and you can't find it? On my turbo Mercedes jobs, we replaced the OEM pumps with 044 clones. We run 5.5 bar fuel pressure. The return is regulated at boost. I don't know what you mean by the return is regulated at boost. You can also get a rising rate fuel pressure regulator. Yeah, you can get, I don't know how you get, I remember the adjustable ones. So if you had a variable increasing rate, that would be cool. I mean, I made some 2-to-1 regulators and 1.5-to-1 regulators, which were pretty cool, but that's not really the way to do it. I don't think. We always have problems with big injectors being linear at idle. They struggle at idle. Sometimes they do. The really good ones don't. Like the OEM ones are really good. Not related to injection. Your opinion on maximum cam lobe duration for a 6-liter with flat top pistons with 706s? Do you mean how big of a cam can you run? Let's not do that. Rather than that, let's why don't you tell me what combination you have and how much power you're trying to make? Because with 706 heads, you're not going to make a ton of power anyways if it's an NA 6-liter. Richard, on the website, the link for the testing video on the Truck Plus cam goes to the low buck truck cam. So just wondering what the curve would look like for the Truck Plus versus the low buck truck. Are you sure about that? Let me see. I thought that it had a comparison of the two, but I could be wrong. Cams and valve trains. Truck Plus. The graph that's up there is a stock cam, and then the low buck truck, and then the Truck Plus. So the Truck Plus makes more power above 5,000 and less below 5,000 than the low buck truck. And then it shows the crossover for both of them versus the stock one. I mean, I just went onto the site and it showed, that's exactly what it shows. I put yes because I'm running multiple pumps. We're trying to do a twin turbo M104 3.6. We would need a 7th injector. The company that makes the system went out of business a few months ago. I don't like using another injector to spray fuel into the intake manifold, particularly any kind of long runner intake manifold, because fuel distribution is not going to be good. I hear injectors referenced to in cc's and pounds. Is that just a difference in their rate? Yeah. Pounds per hour. What's your opinion on the Bosch 210s for Turbo LS on E85? Goal is 1100. Those will definitely work. Metric and Imperial. Sloppy stage 2 cam. Okay. Yeah, so that's going to be 450 or something, 460 flywheel. And then 7.2. Yeah, so that might be getting up near the limit. Keeping it simple sometimes is the best approach. I see Atlanta says hello. Aaron, yeah, Jimmy sent me a video of him opening his Coyote Mustang, and the whole thing was just iced over, and it was thick. So yeah, so you guys stay safe out there, man. Something came up in my feed about ideal intake taper being different for boosted engines. Have you ever tested that? We always thought 7 degrees worked pretty well. I want to see I want to look more into that Bain guy that I follow him on something, and I want to see more of the testing that he's done. I've never tested taper to see what that does, because the problem with testing taper is you're also changing other things. When you change the taper, you're going to change inertial ram, and well, they're probably not going to change reflected wave because it should still be the same depending on what you do to the entry on it. But I'd like to see what that does, and then I would test it first. Like I would want to test it first NA and see what it does, because I would like to see if it is different NA or boosted. And then is it different at different boost levels? You know what it's like. Is it different at different boost levels? Like, does it only change what we're talking about at 30 or 40 pounds? Does it not do anything at 7? Does it really do something at 7? Like I don't know how that's going to be different, but I'm up for listening to whatever somebody has to say about that if they actually have some dyno testing. Meant the video link. It has the description of the Truck Plus link to a low buck truck video. You answered my question though. Appreciate it. Okay, I'll see about the video. I thought you were talking about the dyno graph. About spraying a single injector intake, share some opinion with meth kits. Inconsistent, has to be monitored. Some folks try to use it to help with running out of pump or injector. Yeah, I have shared this many times about specifically about water meth injection because I tested that. We know that running fuel through an LS intake manifold, a long runner, LS6 truck manifold, Trailblazer SS, whatever, any of those manifolds, that you can't spray water meth injection into it and have it give equal distribution. Anybody that says you can do that has not tested it, because I don't know how it gets to be equal, because it's really hard even to get the air to be equal in that. Is a sloppy stage 3 cam a good cam for a small turbo? No, it's a terrible one. Do you think not that the cam is not good? I just wouldn't match those two things together. The cam is really big, and you don't need a big cam for that kind of thing. Just tell me what kind of power you want, and then how soon you want the turbo to come on, and we'll steer you in the direction of a smaller cam, because a smaller cam will allow you to max that turbo out, but it will just come on a lot sooner. Think I'll need a converter with a Truck Plus on a 6.0? No, we're driving that Truck Plus around in a 5.3 Tahoe with a stock converter. So it definitely works. As long as you tune it correctly, it definitely works. That being said, as I've said hundreds of times, when you put a converter in anything, even something that has a stock cam in it, it's going to definitely improve the acceleration. It's going to make the thing perform a lot better, no matter which cam you put it, no matter which cam you have it in there with. I'm coming from a 4.8, so I figured the base torque the 6.0 produces should make it right. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, and when you look at the power curves of the Truck Plus versus the stock cam, the crossover where the Truck Plus started making more power. Now this was with an optimum tune on both the stock one and the Truck Plus, was about 2,700 RPM. So, above that, the Truck Plus is going to be better. Doesn't the boost reference regulator also help the big injectors by pulling fuel at vacuum? Yeah, we went over that earlier, that if you have it hooked up to the regulator, it will lower the fuel pressure, the static fuel pressure. It will lower static fuel pressure. It will lower the running fuel pressure with a high idle vacuum. So if you have 20 inches would be an extreme. That would be more like a stock cam. But even if you had 15 inches of vacuum, it's going to lower the fuel pressure, because just like pushing on it closes it, pulling on it opens it. And so the fuel pressure will definitely come down. And that's a good thing with big injectors. Richard, would you boost reference your regulator when adding the RHP 1000cc injectors to your turbo LS? 83% are saying yes, boost reference that regulator. One of the things Jimmy was saying, and I agree with them, but we've done it both ways on the engine dyno, assuming that we have enough injector. But he likes it because he said it makes the tuning more linear, that it keeps the fuel pressure to the injector stable, so that when you're plugging in all the values, that it's prettier, I guess. It's linear. Thanks for the knowledge. As always, got to be up early for work. All right, man, get some sleep. Be safe out there. Injector stuff is fun. Richard, I have a 6-liter L96, 823 heads, wanting to do a cam, so I wonder what cam you recommend. So what are you trying to get done with this thing? Like, is it a daily driver? Is it a race truck? Is it a carbureted demolition derby vehicle? What is it? What else are you trying to do? Single plane 750 carb, long tube headers, 3,500 to 4,200 stall. Robert, what was your question? I'm scrolling back to see if you had a question, Robert, but I don't remember seeing one. Okay. Maximum cam load for a 6-liter flat top piston, 706 heads. Okay. Single plane 750 carb, long tube headers, 3,500 to 4,200 stall. So you can put a big one in there. So you're going to need to put springs in this, obviously. But look at it, and we can get these because we're a BTR dealer, but the biggest cam that we've put in stuff, and that's the one that we made like 540 with a 5.3, is the BTR Stage 4 LS3 cam. So that's like right on the limit of available piston to valve clearance. Wouldn't a constant fuel pressure that doesn't come up or down upon idle or when you snap off a throttle cause a pressure surge at the fuel res, effectively overpressurizing or put? You don't want the fuel pressure to be constant because the demand isn't constant. Daily, but big cam will be fine. Wanting good power and lower the LSA show truck build. Okay, for if you're driving it around, then I probably would get in that combination. You could get a if you're gonna do you want to run a stock converter on it? You would get our truck plus cam. How much power could a stock bottom end Gen 3 5 through ring gap hold reliably? We had 100 runs at 1,000 horsepower. So it will certainly do that as long as your tune is right. Does a small block Ford style heads equal in tank at exhaust spacing have any advantage over small block Chevy and Mopar other than heat dissipation? I don't know. I don't know just from that. I think you're looking at the wrong thing. I think you should look at more what does that head flow relative to its valve size, coefficient discharge, all that stuff would be way more telling on what the performance potential of it is. I do like the even exhaust and intake spacing, mostly for intake and exhaust sealing, and this is particularly the case with turbo stuff. I think that that's better for that, but not from a performance standpoint. There may be some cooling advantages from having spacing in between them. Have you ever noticed a difference from E50 versus E60 versus E85 or even E90 if you wanted to order racing ethanol? I've never run anything where that would make a difference. I think the testing that I've seen is down to E50. There's very, very little difference in performance between those. But there's a range above where, it's like an octane thing. So above where, if you go beyond what E50 will tolerate in terms of boost and timing, and then you need the higher octane stuff. And then the race stuff is even better because it's E85. The gas portion of the E85 is race gas. So it's even higher octane. But again, that doesn't matter when we're running a 15-pound junkyard LS, at the track or whatever. That doesn't matter because we're not at that range. If you wanted to run 40 or 50 pounds, that would certainly make a difference. I'm going to get a 3800 stall. You can put something bigger in it than that than our Truck Plus if you wanted to. A 3800 stall seems like a lot to me for a daily driver. I don't know why you need that much. That's like 1,000 more than I would go for a daily driver. Although Jimmy has one in the Coyote that's like that. And because it's a lockup converter, that it drives around like a normal thing, not like the old school high stall converters where the thing was like, seemed like it was slipping the whole time. A Gen 4 6-liter 823 head shooting for 800 horsepower daily driver. Which one of your cams and turbos would get me there? Jake, you need a G42 turbo and either one of the cams. But I think on that, is it gonna be a race car or something, or daily driver? If you want more power down low, you could get the low buck truck. But on a 6-liter with 823 heads, you certainly could use the Truck Plus. Cast iron headed 6-liter engine. The heads on that just garbage, or would it be better just to put some 5.3 heads on that motor? It will make more power if you take those iron and be faster accelerating it in whatever you put it in. If you took those iron heads off and put any aluminum head on, it's going to be lighter. And any aluminum head that you put on there, other than the 317s, are going to make more power. Because I think that iron head is like kind of an iron version of a 317 head. It's a big chamber. It has, reasonably good flow because it has a good port design. But the chamber design is not great like a 317. So if you put 706 heads on there, you're going to raise the compression. It's going to make more power. Put 799s on there, it's going to raise the compression. It's going to have about equal flow, but a better chamber. So you'll get gains from that. So any of those, a 241, any sort of rec port head would be better. Symmetrical heads do have an advantage for max effort race engines, and it sure makes it easier to CNC port the heads. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think any of the max effort Trans Am or Cup Chevys have the symmetrical ports right anymore, and haven't for decades, I guess. Have you tested a 75 millimeter torque storm supercharger, and do you think 750 cc would be enough? Installing on a stock for now, 5.3, going to use a boost pump boost reference regulator and 450 liter per hour Yeah, I don't know what that supercharger will do, but you're going to run out of pump, I think would be the first thing that you run out of. If you run a liquid propane gas system on a car, I have not, but we might be doing that on a big block coming up here sometime. Yes, everybody hit the thumbs up button. We have a guy wanting to run something like that on a big block at West Tech. And so I may go down and do that, but I don't know when that's going to be. It might not be for a few months. So on the 750cc injector question, my battery's getting low. How low can you go? Is that, let's see, is that on the 85? Excuse me, 15, no, that's not. Point, yeah, we'll do this. Yeah, I think the injectors are going to support a lot more than the pump will on that 450 liter per hour pump if it's a single. Go with 1000cc injectors. That would be a good idea, but he's definitely going to need more pump if he's got that. E85 on a Yates 358, 14 to 1. Will it live? Yeah, I think it will. I don't think that'll be a problem. Do you have anything going like a channel showing any of your project cars? This is the only channel I have. But I will be doing, and I have done videos on stuff like that. We have stuff on the Tahoe. We'll have stuff up on the NSX, on the S2000. The Tahoe is getting a Turbo 400. So yeah, we'll have stuff up on that. 85 will be pushing on a 450, but it's doable. Have the setup on one of my vehicles. The LPG systems have individual port injectors. It's for propane in liquid form. Yeah, thus the name, the liquid propane. All taxis in Southeast Asia have LPG systems installed on Toyota Corollas. I've seen the conversions on the Australian Barra. That one of those that I have has that conversion on it. Snowed in Greenbrier, Tennessee. Yeah, Jimmy said it got down to freezing where he's at in Georgia. I think Bigfoot would be a big block on nitrous or a 4.8 on 20 pounds of boost. What do I need to do to my 4L80 to keep it alive at 800 foot-pounds? Does anybody have any transmission ideas for him? Is there a place we can see work on your projects? Do you mean where you would go to? We're going to have stuff up on the, I mean, there are videos up on this channel already. If you go to this channel, there's stuff up on the Tahoe on testing that we did on the turbo stuff. LPG tanks are huge, basically no trunk space. HD2 transmission kit for your 4L80 to hop that thing up. It's going to be on pump gas with 450 pump and looking to be around 10 pounds of boost to the supercharger. Yeah, you'll be fine. You're not going to be anywhere near the limit of that. That won't be a problem. I thought you were talking about maxing that stuff out, but that's okay. That's all good in the hood. Do you have those going up on separate playlists? No, there's no project cars because we don't really have project cars where we do project car builds on. This channel is really about dyno testing, about showing what kind of performance stuff does. And we're just doing that on those vehicles. We're doing it on the chassis dyno, most of the testing, and on the street to some extent. But on that one, you know, people wanted to see, like, we did a turbo kit for that application. So we built a turbo kit, which we're going to be selling before too long here when we get the manifolds done. We'll be selling the kit, but we did a video on installing that turbo kit and then testing it on the dyno. 480 with that kit will hold 800 foot-pounds, add a good cooler and a stall converter. I talked to an Aussie about LPG. It actually does not lower the intake temp. The liquid propane doesn't. Richard, on a 4.8 LS 799 home ported heads, is a BTR stage 4 V3 a good cam? The built 4L60 and a 3200 stall. Maybe with that stall on it. That's not the cam I would pick for a 4.8. I think it's way too big, but you know, that's a subjective thing. People have their own things that they think is a good idea and is not a good idea. I find that the guys at BTR, the guys that are answering phones, might be younger guys. And so their idea of, you know, they're all bottom of the page kind of guys. They're all like, oh yeah, if the only thing that stops you from getting a stage 5 is because there's not a stage 5. So they recommend the stage 4. And that's great. And I want them to be like that, because I want people to be like that. I want them to, like, yeah, we need to go all in on this. But I think that most people tend to over cam stuff. And on a 4.8, that's going to be a big cam. Not a big Mopar guy, but is there any aftermarket for cannon valve style LA Magnums and big block stuff? Just a thought exercise. I've never seen anything. I don't know if there are. There are aftermarket heads for those, obviously aluminum heads that would be, you know, offer more flow and stuff. On the small block Mopar stuff, you almost have to have like the offset valve, because that pinch point on those is just not great. The valve is kind of, that push rod pinch is kind of right in the way on the small block Mopar stuff. How is 1,000 cc's measured? Is it shots per 1,000 strokes, 1,000 RPM, or what? No, it's how much fuel it injects over time. Picked up an LS2 403 stroker, short block, dish pistons, forged bottom end, plan your run, force induction. You recommend running LS3 style rec port heads. Aftermarket's okay. Potential compression issues. The LS3 heads will have a big chamber on them, so I don't know how big the dishes are on your pistons. Those kinds of heads will work well, but if you look at the test, that was on a 6-liter, but still, even on a 408, if you're going to do an aftermarket head on that, I would do aftermarket cathedral port heads. I wouldn't do aftermarket rec port heads. They will work and you'll make power, but most of the cathedral port heads are going to be smaller chamber. Most people over cam and over carb. I agree with that. That's what I'm saying. That's why I thought you might have a different channel. I know this channel is what it is. I love to see you working on project cars. And also on this channel, the Omni GLH build is on this channel too. And also I'll have more stuff, like we did some stuff on the Metro. I'm going to do a few more things on it before I throw it away or give it away or something. And then I'm going to do the Sprint Turbo, which is a Bonneville car. Big heads for big Mopars are called Hemi heads. There you go. Building a Gen 6 454, using a ZZ502, comp beehive springs. You recommend going with adjustable roller rockers, or will the factory rocker stuff be sufficient? Roller rockers would be better on that application. They probably will make more power than stock stuff, because that doesn't have any sort of roller fulcrum on it. It's just a slider. So what I'm saying is, I think you would have another successful challenge just highlighting what you're building for yourself. I can't do that. I have only the amount of time that I have, and I don't do project cars. So that's not a specific thing. I know there are guys that do that cover something that they built, but we don't do that. I don't have a shop, so we don't have the things to build a car. I'm not going to redo the suspension, all that stuff. I'll try to cover what I can, but even in building like the Bonneville car, I'm only really interested in showing the dyno testing. Like, I don't care about the coilovers and other things that I would do. We're not going to have a parachute on that car, but on the Civic, we certainly did. but we'll have belly pans and things like that. But I'm not going to cover that stuff. I really only care about the power. cc's per minute or pounds per hour. Yeah, it's flow over time. Looking forward to all the builds. Yep. Yeah, and what we'll do, like with Jimmy's S2000, he's got a cool built motor in that K series, or I rather an F series, so it's an S2000 motor. And then we're going to test a bunch of different turbos on it. So we'll test right now it has a G35. We have some other turbos that we're going to be testing here, 6-liter turbos. And then so we're going to run all the turbos on it. We have a G30 750 or 770, I think. And then we've got I'm going to do some twin testing, which will be cool. I can't wait to do some mirror image stuff coming up pretty soon. But I want to run all the turbos on it. I want to run from a G30 all the way up to a G42 on that car, on that F series, because I think that will help us illustrate what effect all of this stuff has on, because that's a 1200 horsepower turbo. And this one's a 700 or 750 horsepower turbo. And it will illustrate what happens with response to, boost response versus power output. So we could show, hey, look, and this is a 8,500 or 9,000 RPM motor. So it will show you in exaggerated form, because like on an LS, on a V8, a G30 is not going to be the right turbo for that. It's just not enough turbo. Even though it makes 700 horsepower, it'd be ultra responsive. As you're rolling in, you'd have boost. But that's too small for most people. That's why we have the 3584. That works really well. That does kind of the same thing. It has really good response. So on a bigger motor, you aren't going to show really changes between a G30 and a 3584 or a G40 or a G35, because it has all the response already, because it has enough motor to make all the response. But on a F series 2-liter, it's actually a little bigger than a 2-liter. We're going to be able to show what happens with response. And so people will be able to see that and go, oh yeah, look, yes, I want a 1200 horsepower 4-cylinder motor or whatever, or a 6-cylinder or whatever, or an 8-cylinder. But do I want the other things that go along with that? In that case, on a G42, that's actually a really responsive turbo, especially on a V8. And you would know if the trick flow cleaving head is going to fit on top the 8.2 deck small block Ford. Doing a Boss 302 Fox body paper build in my head. Yes, they'll definitely bolt on. All the bolt pattern is all that's the same. What you will have to do though is change the cooling system, the water routing for that. 1,000 cc's per minute. Cleavor gaskets. I don't know if just the gasket is going to seal that. I think you're going to have to do that. We normally do that with freeze plugs, drilling and tapping on at least on the iron heads is how we did it, if I remember right. So would you boost reference your regulator when adding the RHP 1000cc injectors to your turbo LS? 89% versus 11 saying no. Kind of thought that would be... Actually, I thought it would be 100%, at least for a little bit. I didn't think it would end up at 100%, only because like I said, we've done it so that it's not 100%. Most of the time when I run on the dyno, when running on the engine dyno, since we're testing at relatively low boost levels, I usually don't boost reference the regulator. We do, like on the Big Bang stuff, but we have a whole bunch of, but even then, I was gonna say we have a whole bunch of fuel pump and stuff, and a whole bunch of injector, but sometimes we don't. Sometimes we had to put booster pumps on it and stuff. Two to one, like an FMU. Yeah, you can do that, but it makes life hard on the fuel pump. Jet, what's going on? 1,000 cc's is one injector. So each one of the injectors flows that amount. When I'm giving you the horsepower rating, that's for 8 of those injectors. If you cut those numbers in half, it's for 4 injectors. Summertime, daylight savings. Have you done any testing with a Trailblazer straight 6 The American 2 JZ, the Ameribarrett. Yeah, I have videos up on that. We ran it NA and did a turbo on it, but not at high boost or anything. I want to do more stuff. I'm thinking about sending that to Calvin because I think I have 2 of those. Got 2 more minutes. $210, $230 cam, BTR dual springs, my L83. Would your lifters be a good fit? I think that the LS7 lifters are shared by both of those engine families. Is the name of what video? I saw on Texas Speed's website that LS3 heads versus ported LS3 heads gain 25 horsepower on 6.2. I know it might not seem like a lot, but do you think it's a really realistic expectation? The amount of power that you gain from ported heads depends on what thing you're testing it on. So I tested ported LS3 heads versus stock LS3 heads on an otherwise stock LS3, and we got about 10 horsepower. I've tested ported LS3s versus stock LS3s on a 468-inch motor that was like a 700 or 750 horsepower motor, and we gained a lot. We gained 50 or 60 horsepower. So I'm guessing that they tested it on something in between those two. Does water meth help get rid of particulate in diesel engines? I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe if it increases the burn rate or something. I think I'm running 1200 cc's on my Hellcat on E85 and it's making 900 to the tire. Okay, that seems right. What is low boost? Our idea of low boost is like 7 to 10 pounds. Love when you do turbos on the Cadillac or the straight 6, all the weird stuff. I agree. You don't gain much on M104 with ported heads. It's not worth it at all. Well, it just means that you don't have a motor that needs more flow. You don't have the rest of the things that you need to get more flow, that head flows enough for what you're doing. That's all that it means. And I don't know what the head flow is on that. And I don't know what your relative NA power output is, because that's what would decide ultimately whether or not you would gain power. So for instance, that's why we don't get big gains that's why we only got 10 horsepower, let's say, from a ported head on a stock one, because you already had a head that flowed 300 CFM on an LS3. And so we're only making less than 500 horsepower. So it had way more cylinder head than it needed. So we didn't really gain very much. But once we had something that was making, 700 plus horsepower, then it needs more airflow. I don't want to ask a stupid question. There are no stupid questions. There's just questions. Building a 383 for the street, 10 to 1. Planning on doing the 312, 322 is probably a advertised duration number, I'm guessing. And the 537, 559 lift is fine. What you need to tell me, though, is the duration at 50. And then do you have a ported heads? Do you have what intake manifold do you have? My guess is that camshaft's going to be a little on the big side. Overbuilt, what's going on? Would it still be possible to get decent fuel economy on 1,000 cc injectors and a high horsepower fuel system, say on a mild cam LS? Yeah, you can always run less fuel. You don't use all that fuel. The bigger injectors don't mean that you change your fuel mileage necessarily at all. It just means you're running less duty cycle on that injector to get the same amount of fuel. You can still drive down the road at 14.7, just like you do with your small injectors. It could not change it at all. It could be fine. It could be exactly the same. I'm the Grinch. For most users, run the head that you have, slap a cam in it, drive it till you have boost money. There you go. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about cylinder heads. On an LS, I definitely would do a cam and then boost. Or if you could do boost first, I would do that. You don't get fun until at least 20 to 40 through. Pounds of boost. Okay. Aspirate 350, add Edelbrock aluminum heads, big flat tap cam. Not sure of size, flat tops. Is it worth roller rockers or leave a stamp steel rockers? If you're putting aluminum heads on, I'd put roller rockers on it. So looking used to the wasted IR power from an internal combustion engine. Intake at 50 is 254, 264. Yeah, that's way too big for what you're doing. Yeah, that's a race cam, and I wouldn't do that. You won't be happy with that on the street. 6 liter, look at something that's like 236, 248. 6 liter LS 823 square port with a TSP stage 4 F35 or BTR truck cam stage 4 would be a better call going. I don't know. I don't know what the lift and duration and specs are in either one of those cams. 3,000 to 3,800 is a really big range for a stall speed. So we just need to narrow that down to whatever it is. Mike, you asked what the injector rating is and its fuel flow over time. I don't know why you would want to argue with that, since that's been an established thing since the dawn of time. The cam given to me, wasn't sure if it would work for what I planned on doing. I understand that the window opening changes with time. I get that. I understand this. Strokes don't have anything to do with it. It's fuel flow per minute. I know. That's what I'm. He's wanting to talk about something else, but you know, I get that. I get 20 milliseconds is different at 6,000 RPM than it is at 3,000 RPM. The amount of fuel that goes into the combustion chamber, I think, is what he's referring to. But that's a different discussion, though. 1 more minute. Did I ever say 1 more minute? I think I did. Did I? I think I did. Killer Bee Racing. That's the best thing ever. That has to be my favorite logo thing. For a TSP F35 cam and a Camaro, customers thrilled. Nothing that special, and took some finesse in the tune. Yeah, I don't know all of the different cams by name, like off the top of my head. I don't know. You know, I've memorized some of them, but not all of them. And so if you're going to ask me about a cam, just give me the most important thing really is it'd be good to have it all. It'd be good to have the lift and then the duration at 50 and then the LSA. And then that way I could like make a fairly educated guess, because even if I haven't run that cam, there's a really good chance that I've run a cam that's really, really close to that. Because I've run like particularly on an LS, more of that, although I've run a lot of 5 liter Ford cams, a lot of small block Chevy cams, some big block Chevy cams. But we've run like on the LS, particularly if we want to talk about that one, I've run cams that range all the way from a stock to as big a cam as you can kind of fit with the available piston to valve clearance. So, and covered most of the things in that range. And so it'd be rare for somebody to show me a cam, you know, lift and duration and LSA kind of thing, where I wouldn't be able to place that fairly neatly into other things, you know, next to or adjacent to something else that I've tested. $235, $248. Yeah, that's pretty big cam, especially on a 111. That'd be pretty tight to fit stock piston to valve clearance. That one would be way bigger than the 219 cam. So what does at 50 generally mean? If I type that right, that means you're measuring the lobe from the start of 50 thousandths lift to the end of 50 thousandths lift. Injectors are rated in cc's per minute. The ECU controls the pulse width for said RPM. Without changing the displacement or adding boost, how hard is it to squeeze 400 450 horsepower out of a 302 with a cleave-bore head? Thinking of combining it with a Comp 274. 400 you would easily get out of a 302 with a Cleavor head or an Airflow Research Windsor head, so you don't have to completely redo everything and make it a Cleavor, because you don't have to do that. A 274 cam and an Airflow Research 185 head and RPM air gap and a 750 carburetor and a spacer on the carburetor and long tube headers, going to get you really close to 400. 450 would be more cam than that. What are the advantages and disadvantages of having a lot of valve overlap? That's not a discussion. What you'd want to ask more would be a better question would be, what cam should I use to make this amount of power? There's nothing to do with overlap. What will tend to happen as you go up in power and up in RPM, the cams tend to go up in overlap. Basically, it's lower compression, more valve overlap, and more valve overlap for naturally aspirated, only less for boost. On that note, it is time to go. Thank you all for showing up, and I will be back tomorrow.